the new best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. My guy, my friend, my brother in Christ. Yu-Gi-Oh is always fun. There are some huge changes in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. And today, big dog, I'm gonna be breaking down the cream de la crop, the ultimate decks. All the way down to, oh no, what are you doing? What are you really doing? YCS, you treat, it's not even a YCS, it's a Nationals. The U-Trait Nationals showed us some amazing decks and actually should change our philosophy on Yu-Gi-Oh moving forward right now. And today, I'm gonna be talking about the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh in tier list 4. In this particular tier list, I got 5 different categories. The best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh are exactly that, hands down. These are the best. Next best would be the up-and-coming decks, the decks that I think are really, really strong right now. Sleeper Yu-Gi-Oh decks is the deck you've been. But don't worry, if you play against them, you just might get clapped. Takes a really good pilot. I'm not saying that these decks are bad, you just gotta know what you're doing or you're gonna get real quick. Basically, I'm saying there's no easy wins if you play this deck. And then lastly, everybody's favorite. Hey. You coping, my friend. Seriously, did you see my last video? That was some pure copium. We can cope together. One thing I know me and you won't cope about is our ex-girlfriends, right? Right? I'm not coping. So the criteria for the best decks is simple. Every single one of these decks listed had some type of showing over the course of last weekend. These are considered by most as some of the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! I will be re-rating these decks based on the power that they have inside of this format, as well as talking about their strengths and their weaknesses. Let's go ahead and start off with Branded, a deck that players dubbed as the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! My guys, did you get it branded on your chest or something? I don't think players loving Branded will ever fall off. It's one of those archetypes that'll probably just cement its legacy in forever, kind of like how old school players feel about Mermail, but right now it's just in the next best category. Unfortunately for Branded, it's too balanced. Cards like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, as well as Dimensional Barrier, are very powerful, but even if you don't have those cards, Branded doesn't create an unfair situation where you just can't beat the deck, whether it be side decking or just playing a deck that may have a good matchup against it. And to be honest, I think that just may be a good thing. It makes Branded a very fair and balanced Yu-Gi-Oh deck, a deck that probably should never be hit on the Forbidden List, so long as it doesn't create any unfair locks, right? Branded players, you know what you were doing last format and it was not cool. Bestial Rebellion is going to be representative for Dragon Link, which had the second most representation at the World Championship qualifiers. One thing I will say about Dragons is that the smaller scale the tournament it is, the better that this deck does. It's actually crazy. But the diversity of the meta seems to balance this deck out. It is also a deck that I once thought was best deck, but now I'm just gonna say next best. There are some matchups where Dragons just have the most insane matchups in the world. My guy, are you weak to Bestials? Also, if you can't deal with big monsters, just say that. But then there are some matchups in Dragons where you're just down bad, like Kashtira. Overall, this deck is really strong. I don't see us getting any more Bestial support, but as long as we keep getting Dragon support, this deck will find a way to be good. It's been good for like 4 years. Floowandereeze, in my opinion, has taken place of what Branded players used to do with the Gimmick Puppet Lock. This is a sleeper Yu-Gi-Oh deck for the main reason that it is the most frustrating deck to play against. My guy, if you like Floodgates, this might be your deck. Now, there are some decks that do play better Floodgates, like Rivalry of the Warlords and Anti-Spellbreakers and stuff, but the reason why Floowandereeze is just so good is because of Harpy's Featherstorm, which essentially locks a player out from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I wanna play! One thing that I will respect about Floowandereeze is that it is a fairly budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck with a little bit more complexity that players will give it credit. The big problem with Floowandereeze is once its weaknesses are explored, like being able to destroy their spell and trap cards outside of the main phase, preventing them from using their field spell or their trap card to gain additional normal summon, or just summoning monsters in defense to avoid Impin's disruptive effect, it becomes a deck that could fall apart. For hire, my guys. I will not make a Zootopia joke. I will not make a Zootopia joke. I will not make a Zootopia joke. Officer Hops, though, I mean, I'm just saying. This deck has actually been going on a tear, top after top after top. My guy, you really need to look into the for hire strategy. It's a deck that doesn't need its battle phase. Why? Because it's drawing cards on your turn, drawing cards on their turn, drawing cards in between turns. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if it drew cards in between games. It's a deck that accumulates so much overwhelming advantage. If you don't put up solid negations on the field, it will destroy you. This is easily one of the next best decks in the game. Fortunately enough, Runic does have its weakness. It is comprised of 3 engines most of the time, which is for hire, Runic, and Sprite. This also means that if you can simply ignore the Sprite in the Runic engine, you can target the for hire cards and dismantle the deck, as that is the genuine backbone for the strategy. That and blowout cards like Droll and Lockbird hurt a lot. You can Droll and Lockbird on your turn. Damn. Gold Pride Punk, I would 100% say is a top rogue deck. We'll probably get into that next week. But for right now, I think a lot of people are sleeping on this Yu-Gi-Oh strategy. I think one of the biggest problems with Gold Pride Punk is price. Yes, we did just get our Punk cards reprinted, but cards like number 90 are extremely expensive and is mandatory to be able to play the deck. The reason why is because this deck can easily make number 90 to stop your opponent's hand effects from preventing you from completing the rest of your combo. This deck can actually roll with the best. Its biggest problem is being able to deal with board clearing cards, Dark Hole, Raigeki, and Kurakara. Yeah, those cards fucking wreck this deck. But overall, Gold Pride Punk is a very, very solid deck. Heroes. Why do I gotta talk about these in every tier list? Heroes are, well, I mean, I just finished watching Justice League on Netflix. That's a good show, but you know, if we could represent heroes for one person on Justice League, Superman. I don't know if you guys ever watched Justice League, the 2003 and 2005 versions, but Superman gets his shit knocked every show. My guys, he's getting punched every show. Everybody's punching down on them. I think also it's a great analogy because secretly this deck is really good. You just have to know what you're doing. It's apparent that Superman doesn't know what he's doing because he keeps getting punched in the face. Sorry, Supes, but I never liked you anyways. I'm more of a Jon Stewart type guy. You'll actually be surprised on the things that I have to say about Kashtira. Kashtira is one of the best decks in the game, but to be honest with you, it could very much be just next best. We know for a fact that Kashtira is one of the most represented decks when it comes to high-level events. That is 100% true. And we also know when it comes to top cut, Kashtira normally is also one of the most represented decks in that category as well. But one thing I think players have failed to realize is that the conversion just ain't converting right now. Basically what I'm saying is how you get 30% in the top cut consistently, but consistently don't win the event. And when it comes to the higher levels like top 4, you're 1 of 4. Most represented, most top cut, don't win the event, 1 in 4 in top 4. That sounds like next best to me. But I will say though, out of all the decks that we've mentioned so far, Kashtira is the easiest to pilot, and I know players will go to the path of least resistance, which technically does make it still the best deck. I just want you guys to keep that in mind when you guys say Kashtira is the best Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It is, kind of, but not really. Labyrinth has been on a very impressive run throughout this format. I think it's another one of the best decks in the game. I also think the same thing applies for Labyrinth, though it does have a lot less representation than Kashtira. It's a deck that also does still get a decent amount of representation, but fails to convert when it comes to the top cut. Also, we know that Labyrinth's best one-trick pony is those blowout Yu-Gi-Oh cards. If you can play around them, or just open cards like Harpy's Feather Duster, you cook it. I do like though that Labyrinth is a gatekeeper type deck. It forces other strategies to be able to prepare for it, which in turn prevents those strategies from being able to pile up on other strategies to keep them out of the game. Live Twin Sprite and Live Twin Runic Sprite has been a deck that a lot of players have been playing. I think it's similar to Kashtira, as it is a strategy that is a lot simpler to play than a deck like For Hire, but on the flip side, it's also a deck that's not as strong. The good thing about this deck is that you do get simpler play with your live twin cards being able to simplify the game state. The bad thing is that you don't get as much power as some of the other Runic or Sprite variant Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Earth Machine got in the top 64. All right, listen here, my friend. I don't want to cope. I don't want to cope. Am I coping if I put it here? Now, hear me out. Hear me out, hear me out. Earth Machine draws a very similar parallel to Rocket Dragon Link decks. It summons huge monsters to the side of the field, it forces you to play its game, it wins in the battle of attrition, and we know cards like Dark Hole and Raigeki are really strong. Machina Citadel is a walking summonable Raigeki. I genuinely think the only bad part about Earth Machine is that there's not enough Earth Machines like there is Dragon cards. And that is one of the deck's biggest weaknesses. I think on top of that, another one of the biggest weaknesses for Earth Machine is that this deck is as hard to pilot as a Dragon deck, And why play this deck when you can play an already established meta contender that has really good matchups against other decks? Path of least resistance. Manadium is hands down a sleeper. That is right, a sleeper Yu-Gi-Oh deck. My God, holy God. It seems like ever since Super Heavy Samurai kind of disappeared that there has been no genuine combo Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Manadium could take those steps to be one of the better decks in the entire game by being able to make some of the most ridiculous combos and still does get support in the next upcoming sets. The biggest problem with Manadium though is getting rid of its first summon. If you can do that, it ain't good. Mathmech is a fairly powerful Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but with only one copy of Mathmech Circular, you can't make access go what circulars to set up? What's to make access go Unfortunately, Circular is at 1. And with Bestial monsters being played in decks like Dragons and Branded, it's going to be a lot harder to be able to resolve all of your combos. You're going to need to know what you're doing with this particular deck, though I do like that you can always search cards like Lava Golem and Kashtira to be able to break some of the most strongest boards in the game. Essentially, Small World is one of the best cards in this deck. Mikanko! I was actually really afraid for Mikanko at one point in time because I thought it was just going to be a ritual pile deck, but I'm really excited to know that this is a sleeper Yu-Gi-Oh deck. The Mikanko strategy is a deck that's a little bit awkward. It lets you go first, and then from there it summons Mikanko monsters and equip cards to the Mikanko monsters to inflict damage to you, essentially OTKing you while you still have monsters on your field. But what I love about this deck is that it's really good at being able to pivot. Those Mikanko equipped spell cards are really, really good. My guy, the deck has like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a million snatch steals. Bro, triple tactics talent? Triple tactics dust? Come on, guys, I gotta do it every single time. Plus the equipped spell and Okime? If Take Yo Bish was a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, this would be it. Now, I actually have to apologize because I said that Gold Pride Punk was a sleeper Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and that's still very much true. This was representative of Gold Pride Punk. This was representative of Gold Pride. I've seen some pure Gold Pride decks running around, and I just want to clear the air. Unfortunately, a pure Gold Pride deck is not as powerful as a Gold Pride deck that I once thought it was. I thought that if you consolidated your resources into a pure Gold Pride deck, you'd have more potential, and the reason why is because Gold Pride Punk needed a lot of engine. The thing that I didn't factor in is that the Punk engine can be consolidated alongside of the Gold Pride engine to make a perfect harmonious board that can actually stop interruptions. Gold Pride can't do that. Essentially, if you're playing pure Gold Pride, you're expecting no one to play any type of board wipes. That's how dangerous you're trying to play Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Purely has actually consistently been a decent Yu-Gi-Oh deck despite it losing Pearly Delicious Memory. I would say it takes a really good pilot, and it's mainly because you can't just summon my Pearly monster. It's a good doggo. It's a good doggo. That's actually real footage of me playing Pearly. I didn't know it was a cat. I know it says purr, but I didn't know it was a cat. What I do like about Pearly is that it does get more support in the future, and the support is looking really, really good. I think it's time that we finally gave it to it. Like, I mean, Rika is one of the best decks in the entire game. My guys, this is another world championship win on top of its national tops, on top of its national wins, on top of this and that and this and that. Can you guys just accept it's one of the best decks in the game? Rika has planted the seed of sowing to be one of the best decks and create the tree of life. But seriously, Rika has actually developed a solid plan to be able to combat Kashtira easily, just tribute a Rice Heart, as well as combat decks like Labyrinth, as you've seen at the World Championship, just draw Duster. But no, in all seriousness, one of Rika's biggest problems was dealing with back row heavy decks, and the deck has pretty much solved that. On top of that, one thing I genuinely want to note to you guys is that Rika is a plant deck, Dragons is a dragon deck, and these two decks have a lot in common. Earth's Machine has a lot in common with these decks too. If you guys are not catching my drift, Mash type Yu-Gi-Oh decks just might be a thing. I mean, personally, I think that it's really cool that you could play a plant deck or a dragon deck or a cybers deck or maybe even a machine deck and have a little bit of success of playing those particular types, but also mixing some archetypes in it. And I think that it's 100% healthy as long as Konami doesn't go overboard, but soon enough they'll go overboard, you know it. I'm no betting man, but Rika also has some of the best odds to be able to win the Worlds tournament that's coming up very soon. Sky Strikers is incredibly hard to gauge because I don't think it's a bad Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I think it's more complete than Gold Pride, but I do have my reservations about it. The first big problem that I have to mention with Sky Striker is that it is a deck that is 4 years old and hasn't received any relevant support in quite some time. Don't get me wrong, Azalea and Linkage are really good Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but that is not enough to make a 4-year-old deck compete. It really sucks because the other Sky Striker cards have been extremely underwhelming. If they were actually usable cards, the deck would be a lot better. Sprite as a pure Yu-Gi-Oh deck, I have my reservations. I think that if you're playing Sprite as pure, you're not necessarily doing bad, but you are missing out on a lot of the other things that you could play inside of Sprite to make it a better deck. Now, Sprite in totality, I think that it's a little bit better than takes a really good pilot. I'm gonna say sleeper, because Sprite can be so many other things. It can be Tri-Brigade, it can be the Live Twins, it can be Runic, it can be Fur Hire, it can be an engine, it can be an archetype. I think overall the Sprite strategy is extremely good because it does allow you to be able to stop crucial spell and trap cards, which are becoming really, really powerful now through Sprite Carrot. Also, if Sprite Elf ever come back, my guys, we cook it. One of the things that Sprite is really good against, not a lot of people play, which are hand traps, which is unfortunate. And that's actually why I have to say Sword Soul is not in the best place right now. I would say takes a really good pilot. The reason why I say this is because Sword Soul does really, really good when you can throw interruptions at your opponent in the form of hand traps to be able to slow them down, because you'll be drawing a lot through the effect of Moye and Sinister Sovereign Long Yuan. The boards that you make with Sword Soul aren't necessarily menacing on their own and can be played around. It's those hand traps that give you the extra oomph. But unfortunately, a lot of strategies just play through hand traps. And this particular situation makes Sword Soul a little bit weaker, but it's still one of the best solid Yu-Gi-Oh decks to pick up if you're beginning into the game, or if you want something solid, or if you know what you're doing, as you'll be able to unlock the true potential of this deck. And that's all that I have for the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. I want you to let me know down below in the comment section, what are some strategies that I missed? Also, if you think I got something a little bit too high or too low, let me know down below as well. I can't wait to read your comments, and I'll catch you on the next video.